What's up, guys? We are almost there. Before I get into this, I do want to say I will probably miss some points of interest, and some topics may be brief, and hopefully we can dive into some of them in a bit more detail at a later time. So if there's things you want to see, things that I might have missed, things that are important to you, go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and I will try to address them if I can at a later point. Heatblur was kind enough to give me early access to their F-14 Tomcat for DCS World. Their timing, though, just couldn't have been worse. Here I am, family in town, getting ready to celebrate Christmas and New Year's with my family and friends, and I get an email inviting me to take a look at the F-14. So, naturally, I wrote an email explaining that I had more important things to attend to at the moment. I explained that I appreciated the opportunity to share in the excitement during the holidays, but I unfortunately will not be able to indulge in the festivities. I hope you understand. I signed the email, your loving husband, wrote my wife's name in the to field, and pushed the send button without hesitation. I was lucky enough to be guided through my first flight of the F-14 by Heatblur's Grey Wolf, who is the voice of Jester, the AI Rio for the F-14. It was a very surreal experience to have him not only yelling at me from the back seat, but also the wing position as I went on my first sortie. When I first jumped into the pit, I had a look around, and the first thing that grabbed my attention was the mirrors. We have mirrors in DCS in just about every plane, but the detail of the pilot in the mirror in the F-14 is impressive. And even more, the fact that his head movement moves not only side by side, but up and down, and that actually caught me a bit off guard, and I couldn't stop staring. I found myself ignoring Grey Wolf's instructions and started to stare at myself in the mirror almost indefinitely. After I calmed down from seeing my own virtual reflection, I started to check out the pilot seat and what it had to offer. It is impressive. The texturing and attention to detail are breathtaking. Let's just take a moment and take it all in. As for the cockpit lighting, it is absolutely gorgeous. Now, while some of the sounds are still a work in progress, the ones that are done are incredible. The rumble of the afterburner before takeoff, the buffeting, the shaking of the cockpit, the slightly exaggerated sounds of flicking and pressing various buttons and switches in the cockpit, they're all absolutely great. From the start, the default bindings for the Thrustmaster Warthog are really good. For the most part, I've left them completely stock, with the exception of the binding for the Jester menu. This had a conflict with recentering my TrackIR and VR binding. Lucky for me, the Master Mode switch on the stick was empty, so I moved the Jester menu to there. The only other changes I will probably make is to the Jester wheel bindings. The Jester wheel can be used with TrackIR instead of the bindings itself, but we can go over that in a minute. Currently, the only HOTAS with these default bindings is the Warthog, but Heatblur plans to extend this to all major joysticks at a later date. So when Grey Wolf was giving me my tour, and I was done looking at myself in the mirror for far too long, I understood my bindings, I took in the sights and sounds. It was time to leave the ship behind and go flying. So once I was strapped to the catapult, I went mill power and nothing happened. Mill power should have been enough to launch me off the cat, just like doing the same in the F-18. But it turns out you cannot take off unless you salute, which is a binding I needed to press. So counter to how the F-18 works, where you simply go mill or full power and seconds later you're airborne, in the F-14 you go mill or full power, and nothing happens till you press the salute button. Watching myself salute in the mirror put a pretty big smile on my face, and it's even more impressive to see from the external view. The head position is a topic of feedback for me. For me, it doesn't feel far enough back, and I feel like my face is fairly far forward. At first I thought it was because of my ultra-wide monitor, and I tried it in VR, but the results still kind of felt the same. It would be much nicer if the view itself completely zoomed out, allowed me to see past both canopy spars on the left and the right. I already gave Heatblur some feedback on this, and they did point out that it was already on their list for discussion. The HUD is something to get used to. We've all been spoiled by the HUD designed for the F-15, the F-18, Su-27, MiG-29, and various other aircraft in DCS. In the F-14, it's much different. Aside from the slower refresh rate, which, by the way, doesn't actually bother me at all. The HUD typically doesn't offer you the same type of information that you're used to from other modern HUD designs. The HUD has 5 modes, each with their own different layouts. There is takeoff mode, which shows you the vertical velocity on the left, compass on the top, pitch ladder in the center, and your altitude up to 1,200 feet. Cruise mode, which shows you the pitch ladder and the compass. Air-to-air mode, which shows you the pitch ladder and various air-to-air cues. Air-to-ground mode, which shows you various air-to-ground cues, a pitch ladder, compass, and an altitude tape roughly to 12,000 feet. And landing mode, which is similar to takeoff mode, but it also includes a vertical velocity indicator. There is never in any mode a speed indicator of any sort on the HUD, so you'll have to reference the gauge at all times instead. The vertical velocity indicator on the modes that have it is something you need to get used to. It's a bit funky in that its relation to where you are going is not relative to the pitch ladder, but to the true and visible horizon. The pitch ladder is depressed 5 degrees in these modes to make room for the compass, because Grumman chose not to use a combiner glass. Most real F-14 drivers never used it and used the more traditional means of relying on the gauge instruments instead. The Tomcat is a very analog machine. It requires constant trimming for airspeed. As mentioned before, you'll be referencing the gauges more than the HUD in most cases, and it requires lots and lots of coordinated rudder input while maneuvering. If you don't have rudder pedals, I would suggest looking into getting some. In a dogfight, without constant proper rudder input, you are going to have a bad day. It is very easy to get the kitty to show signs of adverse yaw. A mild wing rock, after introducing side slip, it often subsides, but typically requires a correction in AOA to get it to do so. The optimum sustained turn performance is around 15 to 17 units of AOA, and best instantaneous performance is somewhere between 20 and 25 units. Obviously, your results will vary with different loadouts and weight. Another interesting characteristic that I think will get a lot of people into trouble is roll reversal. Typically above 16-17 units of AOA, rudder should be used for all rolling maneuvers, since introducing lateral stick will cause opposite roll and the AOA will build up due to side slip. So make sure that you practice those coordinated turns, or you're going to have one hell of a time dogfighting.
Watch the ground! Tell Meg I love her.
I also wanted to mention that roll SAS should be turned off for maneuvers above 15 units of AOA. The result of it being on is that it will take more pedal effort and cause ratcheting. Departures are also more likely due to cross-control events like the adverse roll we just talked about. Most likely, if you depart and find yourself in a flat spin, you may need to eject. You can try opposite rudder, stick centrally forward, and then you need to set wing sweep. And since the engines have a wide spread, the outer engine to idle and the inside engine to full power, and pray. If you're lucky, you might be able to pull out of the flat spin. Because most of you want to see what the AIM-54 can do, I'll refrain from doing an AIM-9 and an AIM-7 demonstration. For those of you who don't know, the AIM-54 is a long-range active radar-guided missile. I did some quick tests against some AI, both maneuvering and non-maneuvering. What I've found is while the AUG-9 is an incredibly complex and powerful radar, it is much easier to notch than other DCS radars. It is modeled very closely in reality with a notch filter 5 times that of the DCS World F-15. So when testing against the AI at ranges greater than 25 nautical miles, the AI would trash the missile most of the time. However, if the AIM-54 got to pitbull range, it was typically another story. So for now, against AI, I would say depending on your engagement parameters, 20 to 25 nautical miles is probably the best place to start looking to shoot. Now, while I was testing the AIM-54, at one point the missile lofted right in front of me, and what happened next was quite unexpected. Did you see that? That was jet wash. Now, I knew they had modeled this, but for some reason I never considered that it would apply to missiles. But man, was that cool. Now, I know a lot of you want to know what it'll do in multiplayer, and well, I do too. But I'm going to have to leave that for a deep dive for another day, because there are too many variables at play, and some of the systems for those variables are still very much a work in progress. But what I will say is that there is a smokeless variant of the AIM-54, and used in tandem with TWS, I can imagine that this missile will be banned from most competitive servers quite quickly. From the pilot seat, you do have a pilot lock-on mode that allows you to lock on to anything within about 15 nautical miles, but you can also launch AIM-54s in auto-acquisition mode. To do this, you simply flip the ACM cover up, put the bandit on your nose, and fire within about 5 miles. The thing you want to remember is that if you have the ACM cover up, it overrides the conventional AIM-54 launch, so you will need to remember to flip it back down again after you've used it.
There is a bandit, SU-27, 2 o'clock, 4 miles. $11 o'clock. $12 o'clock. Bandit is down.
Air-to-ground ordnance can be set up through Jester. You can tell him to set up various settings like CCIP, CCRP, ripple quantity, ripple distance, or time, and various other things. Here's a simple example of setting up and dropping a bomb in CCIP mode.
Wilco. Wilco. Got it. Wilco. Wilco. Mud spike, 9 o'clock.
Now, lofting is a whole other thing. I actually think that if some of you get good at this, it will be funny to see seat engagements happen with a slew of Mark 82s. I believe if you wanted to, you could carry up to 18 of them. Anyway, let's take a look at lofting.
Wilco. Yes, sir. Wilco. 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 Wilco.
If you want to use laser-guided bombs, it's fairly simple. As long as the JTAC is lasing a target, you can use either CCRP or CCIP, drop a bomb in the general direction, and the bomb will hit the target if the parameters are correct. Let's talk about Jester. Jester is, in my opinion, very cool.
Watch the ground. Shit, 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 shit. Shit, shit, shit. Whoa, watch the ground. Shit, shit, shit. Shit, shit, shit. Shit, come on!
With the current number of randomly stitched together phrases, Jester is rather organic. There is plenty of Easter eggs as well, and while I've heard a couple really good comments from him, I will refrain from putting them in this video as not to ruin your experience when you get them. He's also fairly smart. For instance, he's very good at knowing when to switch radar modes. When I initially started making content for this video, I got really annoyed by the static sound that Jester made when you opened his action wheel. I'm happy to say that this has been fixed by Heatblur and is no longer an issue. Here's an example of what it used to sound like, and then an example of what it sounds like now. Opening the Jester wheel has lots of options separated into categories split into 8 options on the circular pie wheel. You can drill in by selecting an item with the appropriate binding, or drill out by pressing the Jester menu binding again. Jester is contextual to the modes you have selected in the pit. If you are in air-to-air mode, when you open the Jester menu, you'll be presented with air-to-air options. Same applies to air-to-ground modes. The current list of things Jester will do is already very vast and will likely expand as the module development progresses. In addition to the Jester wheel, there are a few commonly used tasks that Jester can perform that you may bind directly to buttons as well. This is helpful for commonly used things such as changing radar modes, unlocking a bandit, and various other things. One of the things I really like about Jester is the traffic callouts. He will commonly call out other aircraft in the vicinity, such as when you're in the pattern trying to land or taking off.
Traffic F-14, 5 o'clock, 1 mile.
And obviously he calls out enemies that he sees, especially within visual range. He also has a rather snarky side. He'll make comments about your takeoffs, landings, and various other things.
Bolter. It's fine. Everything's fine.
All of which are random, so they do not wear out their welcome as time goes on. I also discovered that there is TrackIR support for Jester. You can simply move your head in the direction and press the Jester menu binding to select something. As for the Rio seat, I tried. I really did. Have a look.
Hey, can I get a peek back there?
No.
Oh, come on, please.
Go away, Jabbers. This is my house.
Unfortunately, it's not currently ready to be viewed. Some of the textures are still a work in progress, and Heatblur asked that we do not show it until it's ready. Anyway, I hope this helps answer some of the questions and gives you some insight about the Heatblur F-14 for DCS World. Hopefully we can jump more in depth into some various other topics in the future, but I'm going to see what you guys have to say and we'll just go from there. Last, I want to leave you guys with an engagement that happened when I was testing the AIM-54. I basically went from BVR to WVR to OSR, that is oh shit range, as the bandit passed me and I wasn't aware. Now, what I like about this clip is that it really shows the visual feedback from the flight model as the fight progresses. It shows me struggle with some of the high AOA turns and the jet kind of gets away from me. And it causes some adverse roll and I have to counter that. But all in all, this really looked amazing, almost cinematic, so to speak. Remember to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.
6 o'clock. $8 o'clock low. Spike, 11 o'clock. 1 o'clock low. $8 o'clock. $3 o'clock high. $11 o'clock high. $3 o'clock low. $12 o'clock low. We're on at 6. $12 o'clock high. $12 o'clock. $11 o'clock low. Missile missed. We're on at 6. We're on at 6. We're on at 6. The bandit is going down. Watch the ground. Tell Meg I love her. Her leg amor. Watch the ground. Tell Meg I love her. Her leg amor.